When Elaine and I bought our home, we thought we were buying peace. A quiet little cul-de-sac on the edge of town, tree-lined streets, a decent school nearby, and enough space in the backyard to one day build a play set for the child we hoped to have. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. For years, we had rented cramped apartments where neighbors fought through thin walls and parking was a daily war zone. Finally, this house felt like freedom. At least that's what we believed. The one thing no realtor's brochure warned us about was the HOA, or more specifically, Karen and her so-called neighborhood security. Officially, they were just volunteers meant to monitor the community. In practice, they strutted around in cheap uniforms, shiny fake badges pinned to their polos, and a radio clipped to their belts as if they were police officers. Everyone in the neighborhood knew they weren't real cops, but Karen, the HOA president, encouraged them to act like it. She called them her community patrol and gave them free rein to harass anyone who didn't toe the line. At first, we tried to keep our heads down. Elena and I were too busy fixing up the place to worry about a power-hungry HOA, but Karen always found something. One week it was a letter about our garbage bins being visible from the street. Another week, she knocked on our door to say Elena's early morning workouts in the driveway were disruptive. What the neighbors didn't know was that Elena's workouts weren't just for fitness. She was under contract as a civilian trainer, preparing special operations soldiers for deployment. Her routines weren't ordinary jogs or yoga stretches. They were grueling military-caliber drills, the kind designed to push a body to its limit. To her, training wasn't just exercise, it was survival. I used to laugh when she'd say things like, control the body, control the fight. But standing in the garage watching her lift weights that most men in the neighborhood couldn't budge, or seeing her sprint until her lungs burned, I knew she meant it. Still, the neighbors just saw a fit woman who exercised too much. And Karen? She saw something she couldn't control. It all came to a head one warm evening. I was inside chopping vegetables for dinner, windows open to let in the fading sunlight. Elena had just come back from the store and was unloading groceries from the trunk. I heard the faint squeak of tires, then voices, sharp, commanding voices that didn't belong. By the time I stepped onto the porch, I saw them. Two of Karen's officers had parked their HOA-marked golf cart across our driveway, blocking Elena in. They weren't wearing police uniforms, but they had dark polos with community patrol stitched across the chest and belts heavy with gear, flashlights, radios, and holsters they had no business carrying. One of them, a heavy-set man with a buzz cut, swaggered toward Elena like he owned the pavement. His partner hung back, younger, lanky, but with the same smug expression plastered across his face. "Ma'am," the buzz cut said, raising a hand as if stopping traffic. "You can't park here." Elena froze, groceries in her arms. "This is my driveway," she said flatly. "That doesn't matter," he shot back. "HOA regulations prohibit leaving vehicles in the driveway longer than 30 minutes. You're blocking the flow of the community." I felt my blood pressure spike. That wasn't even close to a real rule. It was nonsense, and he knew it. But before I could shout from the porch, Elena spoke again, calm and steady. "You need to move out of the way so I can finish unloading." The man stepped closer, puffing up his chest. His hand drifted near his hip. "You don't tell us what to do. We're security here. We're the law in this neighborhood." I gripped the railing so hard my knuckles went white. My instinct screamed to charge down the steps, but Elena lifted her chin, eyes never leaving his. "I don't care what you call yourself," she said. "You are not law enforcement. Step aside," and then it happened. In one stupid, reckless motion, the man pulled a handgun halfway from his holster, letting the late sun glint off the steel. He leveled it just enough for the message to be clear. He was pointing a firearm at my wife. The world narrowed to a tunnel. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could only see Elena standing there, one hand still clutching a bag of groceries, the other hanging loose at her side. She didn't even flinch. The younger guards snickered nervously, like this was some kind of game. "You better listen, lady. We don't like troublemakers." Neighbors started to gather now. Doors creaked open. A few people stood at the edge of their lawns, phones out, unsure if this was real or some insane power trip. Karen herself appeared at the end of the street, marching toward us like a general approaching her troops. But Elena Elena was steady as stone. She slowly set the grocery bag down on the driveway. A carton of eggs rolled out, cracking open against the concrete, yolk spreading like spilled sunlight. She straightened her spine, her gaze locked on the man's trembling hand. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," she said, voice low but carrying across the driveway. The man barked a laugh, though his voice cracked. "What, you gonna call the cops?" "We are the cops here." The arrogance in his tone made my stomach twist. He had no idea who he was pointing a gun at. No idea that the woman in front of him had taught men twice his size how to fight blindfolded, how to take down armed attackers in the dark, how to survive under pressure most people would collapse beneath. He thought she was just a housewife unloading groceries. But I knew better, and in that moment, watching her square her shoulders and narrow her eyes, I realized he was about to learn exactly what kind of woman he had threatened. The world seemed to stop. My pulse hammered in my ears, but Elena didn't even flinch. She set the grocery bag down gently, like she had all the time in the world. Her eyes locked on the man's trembling hand. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," she said quietly. The man laughed, nervous but cocky. "What, you gonna call the cops?" "We are the cops here." In a blink, Elena moved. Before I could even register it, the gun was out of his hand and on the ground. His wrist was twisted behind his back, his knees buckling under her control. The other HOA thug fumbled forward, but she spun, using the first man's body as a shield, and barked, "Don't even try." The second one froze. He wasn't trained for this. His little power trip had never faced real resistance. Now staring at a woman who radiated pure discipline and danger, he looked like a child caught stealing candy. Neighbors gathered on their lawns, phones in hand, whispering and recording. Karen herself came storming down the street, screeching, "What are you doing? Let my officers go. They're enforcing the rules." Elena didn't even look at her. She pinned the man harder, his face pressed into the pavement. "You point a weapon at me, you answer for it." The real police arrived minutes later, sirens cutting through the stunned silence. When they stepped out and saw the scene, two wannabe HOA cops disarmed and humiliated, a gun lying in the driveway. They didn't hesitate. The officers separated everyone, took statements from neighbors, and collected the weapon. Karen screamed about community authority and private enforcement rights, but the officers weren't buying it. When they ran the gun's serial number and discovered the man carrying it wasn't even licensed, the cuffs came out fast. As her security team was shoved into the back of a patrol car, Karen tried one last time to regain control. "She attacked them! Arrest her! She's dangerous!" That's when Elena calmly produced her federal contractor ID and said in a voice that could freeze stone, "Dangerous? Yes, but only to people who threaten my life. I train soldiers for combat, ma'am. If I wanted to break them, they wouldn't be standing right now." The officers didn't argue. They shook my wife's hand before leaving, thanking her for preventing bloodshed. Karen's empire crumbled that day. Her HOA cops were facing felony charges, her credibility destroyed in front of the whole neighborhood. And my wife, she walked back inside, picked up the spilled groceries, and calmly asked me, "Did the pasta water boil yet?" I just stood there, heart still racing, staring at her in awe. She wasn't just my wife. She was a force of nature. Karen thought she could rule the neighborhood with fear. But that day, she learned a lesson she'd never forget. Never pull a gun on someone who trains the very people you pray would protect you.